Welcome, Slavin from Boxing Haven. Joshua here, 86 Boxing. So we're gonna have a discussion on '90s boxing. We know there's a lot going on right now in the sport. We'll save that for another time, but we're gonna discuss the '90s, which was a pretty good era for boxing in general, especially for the heavyweights, who have typically been the glamour division in the sport. So with that, we have a little guide that we're going to use, kind of push our discussion. And we want to start in the 90s, of course. The 90s. And we
Yeah,
know that the biggest fight of the 90s, of course, was the upset of Mike Tyson as the champion, undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. Buster
yeah,
Douglas stopped him with a 10th round knockout in Tokyo, Japan, of all places. And it is regarded as essentially the biggest upset in boxing by many. It was a interesting time and a whole lot's going on. Tyson being a fan favorite and all. So, given that, what were your thoughts on Buster Douglas that night?
yeah. I remember that well. I mean, I didn't see it when it happened, but I read about it the next day. So I was, back then I didn't really like Tyson, so I was kind of happy that it
I
happened. I didn't know, of
understand.
course, who Buster Douglas was, but yeah, I guess. I mean, Tyson just had a kind of image that at that time anyway of very very ruthless ferocious guy,
Yeah.
and yeah, so but that fight was really quite amazing, of course. Of course, you had that situation in the eighth round when Tyson put Douglas down, and
Yeah.
it looked like he was going to get away, so but Douglas made it up at 9. And of course, Don King and Tyson then later they claimed that it was a long count. So,
Yeah, there were looking at the different angles, it was interesting. I see how they could make the argument in a sense, but that being said, I do feel that Buster Douglas had his wits about him, so
mm,
I think that it was pretty much a judgment call from the ref, as with any when you're in those situations. And I think that Buster Douglas showed, of course, ultimately that he was able to recover from that knockdown and count
mm,
aside, count aside. Tyson still had other opportunities to get him out of there, and if Buster Douglas was as hurt as they presumed, then I think he would have done so immediately upon Buster getting up.
yeah, yeah, definitely, yeah. I think it was kind of blown up that whole thing with the long count,
Yes.
because he just got up and just kind of proceeded to kick Tyson's ass more or less.
Yes,
So that
he
was
did.
really because I guess they say that Douglas was the first guy that really successfully fought the taller man's fight with Tyson, because
Oh yeah.
there had been a couple others who had tried that, like Tony Tucker, for instance, and
Yeah.
Pinklon Thomas. So, but they weren't so successful. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And he had fought a Bone Crusher Smith at that point too, right?
yeah,
I
that's
remember that
right.
was another one where he sort of tried, at least Bone Crusher did. A lot of wrestling on the inside, tying up ultimately with that fight.
Yeah, that was a disappointing fight because,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know why Bone Crusher did it, because he was obviously capable of hurting Tyson. He did that in the last round, as far as I
Yeah.
remember. So, yeah.
Yeah, I watched that fight a couple of months back, and yeah, I don't think either were really able to get off how we presumed they would. It could have been a certainly more entertaining fight, but it was really fought.
Mm,
I guess the story of it was the two tying up. Really, it was kind of
yeah.
was the premise of the fight.
Mm,
But yeah,
yeah.
that good stuff. And I do recall, as far as Tyson Douglas, one of the biggest mishaps was the fact that his corner, they didn't bring an inswell to the ring
Oh
with
yeah.
him, which is baffling to say the
Yeah.
least.
Yeah. I think one guy called it like it's a prophylactic filled with water. That's what it looked like. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it did, and that turned out to be a huge mistake because I know that they were probably thinking that it wouldn't go too long and Tyson wouldn't suffer much damage, just given
Yeah.
Douglas's past in sort of big fights at the big stage whenever he had those opportunities,
Mm.
but they were sadly mistaken.
Yeah, Douglas was stopped by Tony Tucker, but he was doing well in that fight before that. So and we
Yeah,
yeah, nobody expected him to be able to even last. I guess they expected Tyson to knock him out within 3 rounds or something. You know,
yeah, yeah, and
because he was yeah.
yeah, ESPN has this sort of documentary they released a couple years back called 42 to 1, which is in relation to the odds for the fight with Douglas being a 42 to 1 underdog. And in watching that, you kind of get more of Buster Douglas's story and the fact that he had a lot of stuff going on in his personal life at that particular time. It all
Hmm.
culminated to him sort of taking this fight seriously, based
Hmm.
on, I guess, the relationship with his dad. I think his mother had passed away prior
Yes.
to that. And he viewed this was like one of his opportunities where he just like, hey, put everything together. Everything is on the line, and I'm going out there and I'm gonna be on my game.
Yeah, that was a quite important, I guess, factor that he had that motivation to kind of perform well because of his mother, and yeah, he was
Yeah,
kind of dedicating that performance to her, you can say, and yeah, I think he was always very talented, but he didn't always fulfill that talent. He didn't fight the best that he could, maybe, but yeah,
yeah, and we saw, how that kind of came into play in the immediate aftermath with his first defense with Evander Holyfield.
yeah,
It's
well,
kind of the Douglas of old pretty much showed up.
yeah, he really bottomed out there. it, I think it's that thing when you kind of have achieved, something and you feel like you are satisfied,
Yeah,
you are not hungry anymore, and then you just want to enjoy the spoils,
the, yeah,
So
indeed. Yeah, yeah. But the heavyweight title of the world, of course, at that time, still, I believe, was like meant you were on the biggest stage. You became the heavyweight champion. We're starting to
mm,
get back to that a little bit in the world of heavyweight boxing here in current times, but most certainly
mm,
back then he was on the biggest stage because Mike Tyson pretty much was setting the standard as sort of the biggest stage, one of the most popular individuals worldwide. So, and this happening over in Japan. So yeah, this was. I'm sure that he had a whole lot going on, and he was pretty much in a new space after
mm.
that win.
Yeah, I mean, he had parted ways with Kevin Rooney, so that was also a big, yeah, a minus for him to put it
Yeah.
that way. Because yeah, I think I remember I watched the first fight. No, the second fight with Tyson I saw on TV was against Frank Bruno.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
you could see, even though he won that fight, by a fifth round KO or TKO, but he was really kind of looking uncoordinated, missing a lot. I think I thought that he kind of
Yeah.
you know missed too many punches there, just swinging wildly and stuff.
Yeah, at that point, yeah, he seemed to have abandoned his sort of jab and the things that got him to that
Mm,
point, and he was solely just relying on his powers. Like, I'm just gonna get in there and use brute force to try and get him out of there. I'm not going to worry about trying to actually box him, make this a finesse game. And I think that kind of was the story of the latter part of his career as he continued on through those
mm.
stages post Buster Douglas and post, of course, him being in prison.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pity, because I think Bruno, he kind of chickened out after the second round. I think because in the first two he was really trying to make it a fight, but after that he
Yeah,
looked like he was only interested in surviving, so he just
yeah,
became very defensive. Yeah,
yeah, and that could play into the psyche. And Bruno being the bigger man,
yeah.
it looked as though he would be the one to kind of match Tyson power for power.
Hmm.
But ultimately, I guess as you said, yeah, he just couldn't put it together.
Yeah, I mean, I remember watching them. I think looking at Bruno, I thought that he was gonna beat up Tyson because he looked so strong,
Yeah,
so much bigger and all that. And he did have power, he scored like I think of 40 wins, 38. He 38 were by knockout, so
yeah,
that
yeah,
was really big
yeah,
percentage.
yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely so. So yeah, he definitely had that type of pop.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I know a lot of times with Tyson, it was the mental game as well, with some of the opponents coming in, sort of maybe thinking about how he was viewed as sort of this knockout artist. And one of the things that we, of course, later found out is that when you sort of stand up to Tyson and you really press him, then you can actually detract from his performance. So I think that ultimately is what kind of played out when he got to the likes of Evander Holyfield and Lennox Lewis, even though he was a bit past it at that particular time. But that being said, he was still sort of a salvageable fighter.
yeah, that's true, definitely. Yeah, I don't think he kind of stopped evolving, I guess, as a fighter somewhere right after Kevin Rooney left, maybe.
Oh
And
yeah,
also, against Razor Radok, he took quite many shots there, but he always had a good chin, so yeah,
yeah.
that was kind of lucky for him.
Yeah, that was another one of those interesting ones. Him and Ruddock,
Yeah,
he employed a similar type of game plan of just trying to use brute force to get him out of there. Hey, he was successful with it.
yeah.
But yeah, that was an exciting fight though for that for
Mm,
as long as it lasted. That first
yeah,
one.
very. They had a rematch too, which went the distance. So it was, I think, the last time that he went the full 12 rounds, Tyson. So
Okay.
he's only went, I think, yeah, first time it was against Bone Crusher Smith, and
Yeah.
then Tony Tucker, and then Razor Ruddock. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. That is good. Yeah, and
Mm.
then yeah, of course, from there we are now with the sort of the Tyson of this time, an older Mike Tyson seems to be in a better space. And of course, people know that there's an intended exhibition between him and Roy Jones Jr. It was initially supposed to take place, I believe, in September or this month, but
Yeah,
it was
I think it
postponed.
was last night that it was supposed to happen or something, yeah, like that.
Yeah, this would have been yeah, last night would have been a tough date as far as drawing because there was just
Yeah,
so much stuff going on in the boxing world. So I wonder if that was that kind of played into it as well when the
Mm.
schedule was announced by Premier Boxing Champions, and they saw this pay-per-view being there. Plus, we had some of the other fighters with Taylor and so on, and
Yeah.
then the World Boxing Super Series. So it would have
So they
been,
didn't want to kind of, yeah, that's to take away the spotlight. Yeah, I
yeah. So
agree.
it certainly would have. I believe it certainly would have. So
Mm.
maybe that kind of played into it.
Yeah, I see. There's no new date. I don't know if what's happening with that fight, but
Yeah.
it's not. Yeah, it's not really a fight, is it? I mean, it's gonna be more like an exhibition. But anyway,
Yeah,
maybe.
and I'm good with that. You know, Julio Cesar Chavez and Jorge Arce had an exhibition this weekend. It was
Oh.
entertaining, wildly entertaining. It was 4 rounds. They had on headgear. I'm perfectly fine with exhibitions because when you look
Mm.
at sort of the history of the sport over the years, exhibitions used to be sort of a big thing and a recurring thing in the past. We gotten away from them, at least those that were sort of in televised fashion.
Hmm.
And I think that I'm in support of some of these fighters who are older, who want to get in and do something, at least for a cause or something. The Chavez Arce
Yeah.
exhibition was for his foundation. It was going to help victims who have been, or people in general who have been down because of this pandemic, COVID, and all of that. So I'm all
Mm.
for that, and I view it as far as my expectations. I view it at the level that it is. An exhibition is just when these older guys are talking about coming out and actually trying to fight at the top level. That right there, I'm not in agreement with, and I don't see how a commission would be in agreement with it unless they are only doing it for the money.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. It's. I mean, if it's only for the sake of, doing it, I mean, doing something that you love, that you miss, getting the opportunity to do it again, but on another level, of course, not on such a high level anyway. So that's fine by me. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, I know we're on a 90s thing and not to go on a tangent, but I did see some comment regarding, say, for instance, Sergio Martinez, where he left the comment he's going to fight again. You know, he came back this year. He's going to fight someone. I forget who he's going to fight, but I know in the statement or comment he released, he had been promised by one of the sanctioning bodies. I want to say it's the WBA that he would become the number one contender at super middleweight if he wins this next fight and he's looking to fight Canelo. And I just
Mm.
think that is just a bad idea. And I don't think it will ultimately materialize because there's nothing there for Canelo in doing that. But it's just an
Yeah.
example of like why.
Yeah. I mean, Uh, unfortunately, a lot of these guys have a hard time, like realizing that their prime is over, like
Yeah.
like long gone, and so that's. I think was it Sergio's last fight was in 2014 or 15 or something.
Yeah. Against
Miguel
Miguel
Cotto.
Cotto. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And in that fight, he was basically a shell of himself at that particular time, you know?
yeah. So he received a beating, so
Yeah,
against a smaller guy even.
yeah, yeah,
So
definitely.
yeah. I mean, against Canelo, it was just be a massacre.
Yes, it would. But yeah, I don't see that actually happening. But you never know in
Mm.
the sport of boxing. But I don't think it would be what people are clamoring for. And plus, Canelo has bigger fish to fry right now as far as his deal with
Yeah,
the zone. So we'll see what transpires with
definitely.
him.
I hope
But
that he doesn't say yes. I mean, it would
mhm,
be an easy victory for him, but still, I mean,
yeah.
he would get a lot of backlash, I believe.
Oh
A lot of,
yes,
yeah.
most certainly. Now,
Mm.
you know, sticking with the 90s theme on our guide here, March 17th, 1990, we had the Julio Cesar Chavez Mildred Taylor fight. Now that, of course, is one of the most infamous, most controversial fights in the history of the
Yeah,
sport. And of course, all that led up to the 12th round was essentially forgotten because it was the 12th round in the waning seconds that mattered most. And of course, for those that don't know, I'm sure you all probably do, Meldrick Taylor was stopped with literally seconds left on the on the clock. I think it's probably around. It was less than 10 seconds left, and he
yeah,
got hit. Chavez dropped him. Meldrick Taylor came up. Uh, Referee Richard Steele was kind of asking him, checking him, telling him to trying to get a response from him. Meldrick Taylor wasn't able to do so, and he stopped it. No time left on it after what was presumed to be a clear victory for Meldrick Taylor. Now, what were your thoughts on that particular fight and stoppage, of course?
yeah. I mean, of course, Taylor had been very dominant for the first 9 rounds. I think he won them first 9 rounds. So, yeah, I mean, that stoppage was, of course, controversial. I think what happened that he asked him if he wanted or if he was all right or whatever it was, if he wanted to continue, and he didn't answer because he was kind of looking at his corner or something. Meldrick Taylor, I don't know why. So
Yeah,
that's when he stopped, of course. So the whole thing, but of course, I don't agree with the stoppage. It was just, I believe, 6 seconds or maybe even less to go. I don't know. So, but of course, still kind of had uh, yeah. I mean, he had a case to put it that way, because you are allowed to stop it if the
yeah.
fighter isn't responding to your question. So yeah, but of course it was not a good stoppage.
See, yeah, that's one of those sort of tricky situations.
Yeah,
As an amateur ref myself, I definitely understand the stoppage, and I think it's interesting. Yeah, there was only a short period of time left. As a referee, typically you're not worried about the clock. You're not sitting there and thinking about, hey, I shouldn't stop this because there's X amount of time left. Really, as you're going through that process and things are winding down, you get that sort of 10-second marker where they give you the notice, and a good referee would see them. They'll either point to the timekeeper or do something of that nature to acknowledge they know that 10 seconds is what's left ultimately. And from there, I guess you can, in a sense, get to the point where okay, it's only 10 seconds. You have a ballpark figure of when the bell may ultimately come about. But from a rules perspective, you are there to sort of protect the fighter. And in that case, I feel as though Meldrick Taylor didn't know where he was, and he was a little bit out of there. So I understand based on
yeah,
that premise why Richard Steele stopped it, because you're not supposed to take into account, oh, if there's X amounts of seconds left. I don't want
yeah,
to interfere in this situation. But there have been other cases like that. So I'm in agreement with the stoppage off principle, but I definitely understand, those who disagree with it. And I think
mm,
this is one of those ones that ultimately, if you polled 100 people, you probably have like 50-50 on each side, as far as whether it was a good stoppage or
yeah,
not.
yeah. I think a lot of it depends on who you were kind of rooting for. Like,
Oh,
if you
yes.
are Chavez fan, you agree with the stoppage. If you are
Yeah,
Taylor fan, you don't. Yeah, I think I'm.
definitely rooting interest.
Yeah, I was kind of torn myself. It's hard, of course, with such cases. But yeah, maybe Richard Steele could have kind of taken a little more time to kind of ask him, try to get some kind of contact with him. I
Yeah.
don't know. It's hard to say. It's of course it's not easy when you are a referee in such a big fight.
Yeah, definitely. And that fight took a good deal out of Taylor. Some would argue he was never the same after that fight.
Yeah,
So it really is, a judgment thing.
yeah. Even though he won another world title at 147, but it didn't last so long. I was
Yeah.
surprised when I found out that he had actually won a world title. It was when he beat Aaron Superman Davis. Yeah, that's right.
Okay, yeah, I don't think I've seen that.
Yeah, that was on points, of course. Yeah,
Okay. Oh yeah, Mildred Taylor. I know he's a decorated amateur as well, of course. So,
yeah,
but that's one of those things that will forever be sort of an infamous fight when you look
yeah.
at it overall. Now, jumping into the 1991, even
Mhm.
though there are others from 90, thinking about 1991, of course, one of the big fights there, one of the earlier fights, February 8th, Terry Norris against Sugar Ray Leonard.
Oh yeah. Wow.
This was
That
for
was.
the WBC Super Welterweight title. Now, I haven't watched the fight in full totality, but I've seen enough of it to know sort of what happened. And I know Terry Norris, he's one of those guys who had a lot of fanfare, a lot of backing at that particular time because he looked good. Um,
Mm,
and I do know that, of course, I'm a fan of Sugar Ray Leonard, and of course, I've followed his career. Of course, happened to go back and kind of
yeah.
research it from a history perspective, and I do know that that version of Sugar Ray Leonard, even at a young, what was he, like 30? He was probably like 32, 33, or somewhere in that range. I forget
Well,
exactly
yeah.
how old he was.
34 maybe. I don't know.
34.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that Leonard, even though by some standards, it's, of course, if comparing it to today, when you have a lot of fighters fighting, in their 40s and such,
Mm,
um, Sugar Ray wasn't necessarily that Sugar Ray from the Duran, the Benitez, the Hearns fights. It was sort of the remnants of a Sugar Ray Leonard that was sort of, I would say, 1 foot in, 1 foot out the door from a boxing
yeah.
perspective. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, definitely. He was no longer the same guy, and I felt when I watched that fight that Terry Norris could have ended it. I think because he was kind of holding back, sometimes at least when he had Leonard down and hurt, and he
Yeah,
didn't go.
showing him
Yeah,
some respect type thing. I know that happens
yeah.
sometimes.
It's like he didn't really want to pull the trigger, when he could have. So
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, it was simply like a passing of the torch, and
yeah,
I I remember, sorry, Sugar Ray said afterwards that Terry Norris is the new Sugar Ray Leonard. So that was,
oh yeah,
yeah,
Sugar Ray. Yeah, yeah. I think it's one of those things. It's always interesting, and we've seen this dynamic happen in boxing on other occasions where you have the budding new star going up against the wily veteran, and in some cases, the veteran is still very good and still at least at a peak level. But then you have some of those other cases where the general public or sense is that the younger star is most certainly going to get the win. I
mm,
think back on Sugar Ray Robinson taking on Henry Armstrong. I forget exactly when that was, but that was a similar situation. You have sort of the new guy or the newer star who was up and coming, who was making his name, getting to that big stage against wily veteran who wasn't necessarily the same as he previously was, but was still able to compete at a high level. And in similar fashion, I think the foregone conclusion was that sort of that younger, fresher fighter was going to get the win in some capacity, and maybe the younger fighter held up a little bit just because of the immense respect for the older veterans. So.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. I think Terry Norris, he was very talented, of course, one of my favorite fighters. But of course, he kind of had a chin problem, I guess, and he could just fall apart sometimes, like against Simon Brown, for instance,
Oh
when he
yeah,
lost
Maryland fighter.
that title, yeah. But he then came back strong in the rematch, of course, and really impressed. So, yeah, I think that the problem was that he had a short prime,
Yeah,
Terry Norris, because already at 30, I think he was not, his prime was over already at the age of
yeah,
30. Hmm.
yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting dynamic, and that certainly happens. Sometimes people try to do an apples to apples comparison fighters based on their age. Like, oh, this fighter's he's 33 and that fighter is 30. How could he not be in his prime? But I think
Yeah,
it's a culmination of sort of what you go through as a fighter, how much sort of trauma you're putting on your body, because it's not just solely the fights themselves, but it's really all of the stuff that leads up to you sort of getting in shape, getting ready to get in the ring
mm,
for said fights. And I think that yeah, they're definitely interested, especially when you look back in the early stages of boxing, the early days, the early 1900s, even up to the probably the 60s, 70s in some sense. Fighters were going at it. They were fighting more often then, and it was
yeah,
not beyond the realm of reason that a fighter could be 32 and completely passed and washed, because they fought so often
yeah.
and went through so much stuff. So I think there's legitimate sort of cause there as far as some fighters just kind of burning out at earlier ages than others.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. I think it was kind of common that a fighter would be all, I mean, past his prime at 30, back
Yeah,
then in 50s, 60s, 40s. Well, yeah.
yeah,
There were a few that, could, that had a little longer prime, like Sugar Ray Robinson.
yeah.
I think
Yeah.
also Ezra Charles, maybe, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and those fighters are, in some sense, when you look at the sort of grand scheme of the sport, the grand history of boxing, which has a very, very deep history, those fighters are, in some sense, anomalies, because there are definitely more of those fighters who are by 30 are pretty much past it than there are
Mm,
those who are sort of older, the George Foremans and the Evander Holyfields, who can still compete at Bernard
yeah.
Hopkins compete at a high level while they're older. Sugar Ray Robinson, as you mentioned, Bob Fitzsimmons back in the day, he competed
Mm,
at the high level. But I think that's more of an anomaly. And generally, when you sort of weigh everything, yeah, more oftentimes, yeah, by
yeah.
30, the early 30s, a lot of fighters are not the same guys.
Yeah, I think also the trainers back then didn't perhaps know enough. I mean, they didn't know as much about the human body, everything, as they did in the 80s and the 90s and now, So,
Yeah,
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 that was why the fighters were able to have longer careers after,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, I
So
agree.
like for instance, Manny Stewart, he was very good. I think he was a very good. He just knew a lot. He seemed to know a lot
Hmm.
about all this stuff. Because I remember in that documentary about the Hagler Hearns fight,
Okay.
Tommy Hearns, he got a massage before that fight in his dressing room. So
Uh,
Stewart was very angry because he says the massage leaves the body spent. So he
Yeah,
knew all that, which was
yeah.
very important, of course.
Oh yeah, yeah. Manny Stewart, legendary trainer. Yeah, and he showed his worth, and he definitely was knowledgeable. I mean, it wasn't just Tommy Hearns, the other fighters. I think he helped sort of revive or take Vladimir Klitschko to the next level as well.
Mm,
And I think yeah, he was a sort of a great steward of the sport. Definitely love that Kronk brand as a whole, as mentioned as a whole. I think we mentioned that in a previous discussion. But yeah, yeah, I think all of that stuff matters. Some of them are viewed as superstitions, but ultimately it definitely matters.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely, yeah.
Now, another one of significance, 1991, Evander Holyfield versus an old but still able to fight George Foreman for the undisputed heavyweight championship. Now, this is after Evander Holyfield had, of course, stopped Buster Douglas and picked up the titles.
Yeah.
And this ended up being a unanimous decision win for Evander Holyfield, who is really sort of a very throwback fighter in the sense that he came from a lower weight and really, really shined at heavyweight, in
Yeah.
addition to some of the other weights. So, yeah, what were your thoughts on that fight?
Yeah, I watched it kind of recently again. No, I think it was a very, of course, exciting fight. Foreman was able to land, I guess, more punches than people might have expected, but that's
Yeah,
because Evander had no defense practically. He just went forward and traded. But I think also that Holyfield was also quite impressive in that fight.
yeah,
He he landed a lot of good punches, good combinations, and yeah, I mean it was just a true slugfest.
yeah, and I think that Foreman, if anything, showed that he's sturdy. He had a sturdy chin, even
Yeah.
after all of those years. He had his situation, of course, when he was younger, but that second iteration of his career as an older fighter, he just showed that, he could use his sort of IQ, but I think he really became one with sort of his sense of body, his understanding of what he could do
Mm.
physically. And yeah, he definitely showed that he still had one of the toughest chins in boxing because he took a lot of shots, and
Yeah,
withstood it.
well, yeah, that was pretty amazing. I remember, like Holyfield, he really had some good, what should I say, rallies. Where he stunned Foreman a couple of times, but he was never really able to really kind of get him in real trouble. And yeah, so I remember Foreman would not sit between the rounds, so that was
Uh,
quite special.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, Big George. Yeah, he
Yeah,
probably kind of wanted to keep the blood flowing in those legs, those
yeah,
older legs.
yeah, that's right. And he was trained by Angelo Dundee
I
back then, so
wonder
yeah.
if that derived from. So was he? Was that something that happened after sort of, or wanted to take him on because of that history with Ali? You think?
I don't know really, but I do remember when also before the fight, Ali he went in the ring and he came to kind of towards Foreman, and then he said like something like "fight like fire" to him or something like that.
Yeah, yeah,
I don't know.
yeah.
So
Legendary Ali. All right, good stuff.
yeah,
Yeah. So another one, and I don't know. I haven't seen the fight. I probably should have seen it, but I'm gonna watch it. But I know what happens, of course. June 1st, '91, Terry Norris stops Donald Curry, who was another one of those guys who
mm.
had a lot of fanfare and people were fond of. Uh, did you watch that fight?
Yeah, I did it. No, it's a while since I last seen it, but yeah, it was another very very good fight, very exciting. But of course, Norris ended up knocking out Curry in the eighth round. That was also very good knockout. But Curry, he did put up a fight much more than Sugar Ray
Oh,
Leonard. But he
oh yeah,
was
yeah.
also a little younger, so. But
Okay,
it was at the end of his prime, of course, and I think he retired after that fight. Curry,
okay,
yeah.
okay. Yeah, I
So
would have to look it up because I'm drawing a blank on the actual knockout in itself, trying to think back on what it looked like. But I know it was sort of one of the bigger fights that are listed there.
yeah, I mean, both guys, those kind of fighters could never be or seldom be boring to watch because
Yeah.
both were fast. They could hit like serious power, and yeah,
Oh
they
yeah.
could get knocked out, of course.
Yeah, yeah.
So
That is true. All right. Well, so we jump ahead to 1992, and of course, the most significant fight of that year was without a doubt Riddick Bowe and Evander Holyfield in
yeah,
their first clash, which was really one of the all-time great fights just from a viewing perspective. It had a bit of everything you could ask for. You had both fighters, Riddick Bowe being the bigger man, he's him choosing to kind of really exchange with Holyfield, whether exchange with Holyfield on the inside, which was more of Holyfield's game, and Holyfield being able to sort of take and withstand some of those huge shots that were coming from Riddick Bowe. And I've heard mentioned, I think Teddy Atlas is one who uses this term that every time a fighter leaves the ring, they take a piece of them with them,
mm,
or every time they're in a fight, a piece of them is taken. This is definitely one of the examples of those fights that there were just heavy blows in action just going around throughout the fight, and I have no doubt that both of those fighters left a piece of them in the ring that night.
mm, yeah, definitely. I mean, it was just a case of Holyfield not fighting the right fight, I guess.
Yeah,
Being too stubborn to box and move, as he should have done. He just went straight at Bowe, and yeah. At first, it looked like he had some success, of course, first three rounds, but then Bowe just started really countering him well, and just being able to, as Holyfield himself put it,
yeah,
after a fight, he was able to top everything that Holyfield had to bring, So
yeah,
that,
yeah,
yeah, you had that 10th round, of course, which was very like movie like round where Bowe first really kind of rocked Holyfield badly with that
yeah,
right uppercut, I think it was. So, and then Holyfield just bounced back. That was, yeah,
yeah.
amazing.
Holyfield's, yeah, he's one of those sort of just overall historically one of those super tough guys, those hard
Yeah,
guys. Just that it's amazing some of the sort of wars he was in and what he was able to withstand. And
yeah,
he had one of the better chins because he wasn't necessarily a huge heavyweight,
no,
certainly by certain standards, at least, of course, today's and then that's when you look at it overall. But man, he had most certainly one of the best chins in the history of the sport.
yeah, definitely, and heart and
Yeah,
everything like durability. I just could not believe what he was able to take and then come back, bounce back. Not just in
yeah,
that fight, in some others as well.
yeah,
Yeah, so
yeah. And of course, they went on to have two other fights, right? Holyfield and Bowe, and just
yeah,
as similar to the other ones. You had some of those actions, but at that point, of course, uh, when it was all said and done, Bo ultimately won the rivalry to a certain degree, but it wasn't a knock on Evander Holyfield because he gave everything
yeah,
in going through that.
yeah. He was weakened in the third fight. I know that he had hepatitis, I believe, before that, not so long before. So
Yeah,
it was, yeah, apparent already. I think after he knocked down Bo in the sixth round, it was he looked like he was, finished, like
yeah,
nothing more to give. Let's go home. Yeah. So, but it turned out, of course, that he was the one that would last longer than Bo. So,
yeah, yeah. That was pretty crazy. Yeah, Bo and besides the Holyfield and
yeah,
the Galata
because
fights were pretty decent, but yeah,
yeah,
Bo was one of those guys. We wanted to see him in there with Lennox Lewis. It's a shame that never happened.
yeah. Yeah, that's a big shame. Also, that he could have, I think, fought Mike Tyson. He did talk
Mm,
about it, I know, but it was just for a Golada fight or fights that kind of really destroyed him as a fighter. And,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Those are some interesting fights as well. Certainly, yeah, with the
yeah.
Galata.
To
Yeah,
put it
crazy stuff.
mildly,
Yes, to put it mildly,
yeah.
without a doubt.
Golada was like, who is this guy? I remember when he's from Poland and he's
Yeah,
so good. What's what's this like?
yeah,
Yeah, he was just another case, like quite
yeah.
tragic.
Certainly,
Yeah, quite tragic case.
yeah. Certainly is one of those, and
Yeah,
he made for entertainment. Him and Lou Duva made for entertaining dialogue, I would say.
yeah, yeah. I think he could have been a champion, but he just it was just not meant for him. He just didn't have the luck, I guess,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
he did have everything else, but which is
yeah,
needed. Hmm.
yeah. It happens for sure. Now,
Yeah.
moving into 1993, of course, this was the first fight between Roy Jones Jr. and Bernard Hopkins, and the
Oh
only
yeah.
fight that really mattered compared to that one they did several years later. This is for the IBF middleweight title in a fight in which Roy Jones Jr. was really at the top of his game. Some argue that Roy was at his best at middleweight, and in this case, Hopkins he had some of those traits that he's known to have, and he was one of those fighters who peaked later in his career. But it was a fight that showed that Roy Jones Jr. was just on a major level as far as his work at middleweight, and I don't think a ton of people in history would have defeated him during that period.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. I think he even fought with an injured hand or something.
Yeah,
I remember, but he was really, yeah, kind of dominant. Even though it was, I mean, the fight was kind of competitive, but he was definitely the better man than Hopkins. And yeah,
yeah, most
because
certainly.
yeah, it's true that Hopkins hadn't really yet developed fully as a fighter. So yeah,
Yeah, he's one of those examples who of a fighter where they're sort of prime from the general standard in which we think is sort of like mid to late 20s. That's what they generally sort of associate your prime with. But he was one of those fighters that later on he was fighting at a very high and elite level, and I
yeah.
think it was partially because of sort of his lifestyle and the way he fought as well.
Hmm. Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, he was not so entertaining always, anyway, but
Yeah,
he was very, very solid. I mean, he was very hard to beat, obviously.
Ye-
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, and another fight, September 10th, 1993, was the infamous Julio Cesar Chavez versus Pernell Whitaker fight that ended in a draw
Oh,
for the WBC welterweight title. This is a fight I watched it. I can't remember if it was last year or the year before. I can't remember exactly when I last watched it, but it was a fight that was, of course, controversial. What I saw, I thought that Pernell Whitaker edged him out. And that is something that continues to be a debate to this day. What are your thoughts on that?
oh, I'm afraid I haven't really yet watched that fight, but I
Okay, okay.
I know that everyone I mean I know that they said that Pernell Whitaker was wrong. So yeah,
Yeah, yeah, and really the story of it was Pernell Whitaker's movement, his defense made it hard for Cesar Chavez to really get off on him,
mm,
especially plotting forward. And Whitaker,
yeah,
of course, is up there in the ranks when you talk like all time defensive fighters. And he was a defensive fighter who wasn't afraid to put out a little offense, so he wasn't just all defense. And I think the story of that fight was really his movement, and Chavez found himself missing a lot when trying to get at Whitaker. And Whitaker deserved to get the nod in that fight, but
yeah,
you know how it is sometimes.
yeah. I mean Chavez was with Don King, and he did lose not so long after that to Frankie Randall, but that's
Oh
because
yeah,
Randall was really better, and he scored a knockdown in the 11th round. So kind of they just had to give it to
yeah.
Randall. Yeah,
So speaking of that, that's one fight I need to watch right there: Frankie Randall versus Julio
yeah,
Cesar Chavez.
very good fight. I think Randall was I mean, just outstanding in that fight. Yeah,
Good stuff.
the
All right,
surgeon. Yeah,
the surgeon.
yeah. He,
Okay,
he had been waiting. I think he had been waiting for his chance, for a while. So he really took it seriously, and yeah,
it's like I'm not gonna let this pass me by. Handed Chavez his first defeat.
yeah, and that was a huge upset, of course, because
Yeah,
Randall was not a household name, So yeah,
yeah. Another one of those examples that your star can essentially be catapulted by beating another star
mm, yeah,
or
that's right.
superstar, I guess you can say, in the case of Julio Cesar Chavez, because
Yeah,
he's Mexico's sort of greatest champion, but in many regards.
yeah. I mean, it was a huge victory, of course. He was like 89 and 0 and 1 or something at that
Yeah,
time. That was pretty, crazy.
yeah, it is. So yeah, jumping ahead to that, 1994, I would say there are a lot of fights you had. Of course, Lennox Lewis, Oliver McCall. Oh yeah, we're
Mm,
still in '94 because the Randall Chavez you had that fight was '94 as well. But you had Lennox Lewis, Oliver McCall. We know what happened in that fight. It was an
yeah,
interesting fight, of course, um, and it was. Uh, oh yeah, yeah. This was the version. This was the first fight actually. Now that I think about it, or I'm reading
yeah,
this correctly, where Oliver McCall pulled off the upset. In
yeah.
front
It
of
was a great knockout, really.
There's one of those examples where Lennox Lewis kind of let his guard down a bit and got
Mm,
caught. And of course, we know
yeah,
that played out twice for him in his career in similar fashion.
yeah, that's true. Oliver McCall was I think, very underrated at the time because he had a few losses, but he
Yeah,
also had some good wins. So
yeah, he was a decent fighter.
yeah,
Had a good mixture of skill. He could punch a bit.
yeah,
Um,
a very um, fast, and yeah, I mean good physical tools.
yeah, solid heavyweight for sure.
Yeah,
And you know course, he had some of these demons outside of the ring, which ultimately led to him sort
Yeah,
of not really feeling his potential overall, you know.
yeah, that's true. The nose candy, yeah.
Yeah, the
That,
craziness.
yeah, a big shame.
Indeed. Now, 94 was also the year that 45-year-old George Foreman became
Well,
the oldest heavyweight champion ever to this point by defeating Michael Moore by knockout in the 10th round. And Foreman was losing on the scorecards as well. And this
yeah,
was an
that was,
example, a good example of sort of an older fighter putting together the right kind of, well, I guess you could say he put together the right kind of game plan, but I think it was more so he showed that he has a chin. And Michael Moore is another one of those guys who wasn't a big heavyweight, and it's just
yeah,
like the combination of that, then the power that the older Foreman still possessed that got him that victory.
yeah. That was another like cinematic moment.
Yeah,
Yeah, because yeah, Moore had been very dominant, I believe, and yeah, it's simply that he perhaps didn't expect Foreman to be able to land such a punch, you know.
yeah, and Foreman had fallen short in his sort of uh, title campaign in his comeback bid. He had fallen short each of the
Yeah,
other times he
he
had the
lost to
opportunity.
he lost to Tommy Morrison. Yeah,
Yeah,
that was a fight. I guess at least some expected him to win, maybe, or to be able to win, but he Tommy Morrison just fought a better fight, a smarter fight, I guess. So yeah,
yeah, yep, indeed. And then November 18th of that year, 94 still, Roy Jones Jr. showed that he still had mettle in defeating James Toney. And the
yeah,
thing about Roy Jones at that particular time, and this was for the IBF super middleweight title, at that particular time, it wasn't just the fact that he was winning and dominating these fights. It was also the fashion in which he was doing so, where his opponents, even at that top level, practically
yeah,
weren't even winning rounds. It was just pretty much all Roy in its entirety. And that was the case with Toney, who I know some had mentioned, hey, he may have had trouble making the weight, so on and
yeah,
so forth. But I think that Roy Jones just put together a proper game plan, and his athleticism, of course, size and all of that played in his favor. And even Wiley, sort of one of the better boxers the sport has seen, just from a crafty technician standpoint, James
mm,
Toney wasn't able to tame this version of Roy Jones.
yeah. I think it was simply the case of Roy being too fast, you know, and too fast. Of course, he was very good
Yeah,
in other fields as well, and yeah, he just simply he did everything right and had the right game plan, and yeah,
yeah, yeah.
Tony might have been as they said, kind of weight drained, or but I think even if he hadn't been. He would have always struggled with Roy's speed, you know, because he was
Indeed.
not a very fast fighter himself. So
No. So yeah, I'm in agreement, and yeah, I think that was a good showing. It kind of seems like a far gone sort of vision or view now, because the last half of Roy Jones's career was really that of sort of a losing fighter, sort of way past it, extremely past it, of course. And many people who may have started watching in the 2000s probably don't know of some of the feats from the 90s, or how he looked at those particular times.
yeah, yeah, that's the problem.
Mhm.
Yeah, as you said, he was. I guess he was best at middleweight and super middleweight. That those were his best. weight
Hmm.
classes. I think already light heavyweight, he was slightly undersized, maybe for
Yeah,
yeah. So
yeah.
yeah,
And he had some great fights at light heavyweight as well, and he still had his athleticism and speed there. He was able to do
yeah,
some good things there as well.
yeah. It was just that perhaps that division was not at its strongest back then, but yeah.
Hmm.
I know, for instance, yeah, he had a pretty hard fight against Eric Harding, for instance. If you,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, so that guy was also very good technical boxer. Yeah,
Yeah,
kind
because
of,
that was interesting. Yeah, see
yeah,
the sort of fighters that can kind of throw off or throw off a little bit of sort of
yeah,
the athletic fighters' game, just given their style, of course.
yeah. And before that, you had, of course, Montel Griffin, which was
Oh yeah,
the first loss of Roy Jones, even though it was a disqualification. But Montel
yeah,
Griffin had been the first one to really give Roy trouble, with his
yeah,
skills and all that. Yeah,
yeah. And Roy, it looked like Roy was not in first gear in that fight, leading up to that sort of disqualification, of course.
yeah, yeah. That's right.
All
So
right.
yeah,
Cool. So then we jump to 1995, February, one of their bigger fights there is listed. I haven't watched the entire fight, but it's Nigel Benn against Gerald McClellan. This
oh
is a fight,
wow,
of course, where he ended up going into coma and suffering those issues, the
yeah,
brain damage, basically. Um,
yeah.
now, I haven't watched the fight in its entirety. I just know of the story and what happened. Have you watched it in its
Yeah,
entirety?
yeah,
That's,
I have, yeah, but I think only once in its entirety. But yeah, I have seen the
now,
fight.
do you think it was a combination of him taking too many shots, or maybe something
Yeah,
led up
definitely,
to it in training?
definitely, because Ben was landing really hard, clean shots for quite a long time, before that stoppage, and it was just, yeah, uh, because McClellan had never, I think, had he really had he most of his fights had ended in one round before that or something. Five
Yeah.
rounds against Julian Jackson, in the
Oh, yeah,
first
yeah.
fight. So he was really not prepared for such a fight. While Nigel Benn, he had been like they say, he had been working with a guy who had kind of hypnotized him,
Okay.
into believing that he was invincible, whatever, something like that. So he was very, very, very
Interesting.
determined, to win.
That's it's definitely one of those sort of unfortunate situations in boxing. And sometimes these situations do happen, probably less often than you'd be led to believe if you were watching sort of mainstream media, because they typically jump in when you have situations like this come about. And then we, of course, get the calls of, is boxing too dangerous of a sport? Should they reduce the amount of rounds, so on and so forth?
Mm.
But yeah, it's just a sort of unfortunate situation overall. And I know that sometimes, it takes, I think this is where the importance of the corners comes into the fold as well, because no one knows the fighter better than their corners, and the
Yeah,
corners, their team knows what they may have done in training leading up to that. They know whether or not he had to, or a fighter had to sort of drain themselves in order to make
mm,
the weight and all, and whether they were really truly ready and in the proper shape to act in condition to be able to actually go out there and compete at that level. So I think that's where sort of the onus is on the importance of having a great corner and team behind you.
yeah, definitely. I think I believe McClellan, he had also been trained by Emmanuel Stewart, and then he kind of broke with him because I don't think Stewart really wanted him to fight Nigel Benn. So
Okay.
that was so then he had hired some kind of really like incompetent guy who wore a hat, a sea
Mm.
captain's hat or something like
Oh, yeah.
clown figure, like So I
One of
mean,
those guys who was basically not going to challenge him or was going to say yes to whatever, essentially.
yeah, I mean, it's just that fight should have been stopped before. That's for sure. I think I after the eighth round or something, I think many people say that because McClellan had taken a lot of punishment, and then if you look at it, I think uh, his I have talked about it before. Shape, the skull shape does have some, does play a part in how
Yeah.
many punches a guy can take. So he
Yeah.
had kind of the wrong shape, very long and
Mm.
narrow.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
people with that kind of skull, they are usually more, what do you call it?
Yeah. It's
Susceptible,
acceptable. Yeah.
yeah, to
Yeah.
to getting hurt, to punches.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah. Definitely an unfortunate situation. And yeah, commissions should definitely do a better job and do their part to continue to help prevent those types of things.
mm,
Um, Now we can jump into 1996. I know we mentioned earlier Tyson Bruno. We know what happened there.
yeah,
Another fight, another sort of big fight, at least, especially in the taking Mexico into account. Oscar De La Hoya beat Julio Cesar Chavez for the first time,
yeah,
and if I'm not mistaken, this was there was a cut that
mm,
took place. Oscar was winning the fight, in my opinion, of course, but
yeah,
cutting Chavez Jr. and it led to a point where the bleeding couldn't stop, and I guess the fight was eventually stopped by the doctor, or the doctor provided that guidance and such. And Oscar De La Hoya sort of won that sort of battle of, and it was almost like a sort of passing of the guard type thing. Mexican American Oscar De La Hoya against Mexico's own sort of star hero Julio Cesar Chavez.
mm.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, of course, Chavez was no longer in his prime, but he was still, he was not
Yeah,
finished by any means. He
definitely.
went on to fight for like 9 years or something after that.
Yeah,
But yeah, I think Oscar was just too much for him because with his speed and power and all that, very,
yeah,
in the prime of his life.
yeah, yeah. And Oscar was when you think about it, he was a big lightweight. He's
Yeah,
at about 5'10". He's somewhere in that 5'10" range. So he's a big lightweight, and you're right. He
yeah,
had speed. He could put together his punches well. Very good boxer.
mm,
Excellent left hook.
yeah.
And
He was just very strong in all departments, I guess. I mean, good chin, very good chin, good skill, technique, power. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, and actually, yeah, he was a big lightweight, but yeah, this took place at 140, the
yeah,
WBC
140.
light welterweight title. So yeah,
Yeah,
even for 140, yeah, he still had the he was
yeah,
longer than a lot of fighters, and of course we know he had the sort of fundamental aspect of it too, uh, just given that his Olympic pedigree and all.
mm,
And Oscar, he's always one of my favorites to watch, even to this day, going back seeing
yeah,
some of his stuff.
definitely. Yeah, mine too. Yeah.
Good
Mm,
stuff. And September 7th, 1996, we had Mike Tyson take on
Oh,
Bruce Seldon in a fight that, if you look at it, I don't know if how hurt Sheldon was. Maybe his pride was hurt more than anything, or he was just
yeah,
thinking too much of it. Tyson did connect with him, but it didn't seem to be a blow that would take him out in such a quick fashion. But ultimately, the aura around Mike Tyson, even at that particular time, was essentially at an all-time high. So a
yeah,
quick work. I would say, what do you think of the fight? But I guess it really wasn't much of one.
yeah. It was a no fighter. I mean, Sheldon, yeah, of course, he didn't look so scared. I guess he did kind of attack, and
Yeah,
he tried to land good punches, but he just seemed, I don't know what happened. He just looked like he kind of gave up. Then once he got hurt, it looked like he just kind of thought, oh, what the heck, I'm out. I'm out of here. I don't want this. I don't need this.
no,
So
yeah.
yeah,
Turned
that's
out
what
to,
it looked like. I don't know. Maybe he was really, really finished. I don't know, but
yeah, I'm kind of I side with you. Yeah, it looked more so like he just
yeah,
knew that it would be inevitable that he was going to get knocked out. So
yeah,
why prolong it?
yeah. That's
Yeah,
right.
why
Yeah,
prolong it? And of course, rapper Tupac Shakur. I'm a rap fan. He
yeah,
got shot that night in
yeah.
Vegas.
So that kind of became more famous than the fight itself. What
Yeah,
happened after the fight. So
yeah. Crazy date there, September 7th, 1996. All
yeah,
right, and then we fast forward to November 8th, and that's the first fight between Evander Holyfield and Mike Tyson. And I think
yeah,
of, and I think this fight probably more than any, and of course the next fight when they actually met again, showed that the expected Mike Tyson of the previous years, if you were expecting that sort of 80s version of Mike Tyson, or even for that matter, the early 1990s version of Mike Tyson, that guy was essentially gone at this point. And I
mm,
think this fight showed that more than any at this
yeah,
particular time. What were your thoughts?
yeah. He started out well. I remember I've seen that fight a couple of times. But the moment that Holyfield kind of started pressing the action,
Yeah,
he just didn't have that much, to yeah to counter with. I think the fight was kind of competitive until maybe the sixth or seventh round. I don't know. I believe he was dropped in the sixth round by a body shot, Tyson. Yeah,
yeah,
but it was kind of very quick, like yeah, flash knockdown almost. So, but then he really started. I mean, Holyfield started taking over really more and more after that. So I guess that knockdown might have even kind of emboldened Holyfield,
yeah.
to keep attacking, So yeah, I don't think anybody expected Holyfield to win. Not many anyway. So he
Yeah,
was
and
he was older by like 4 years almost, like so. But
but
that
yeah,
was
yeah,
just a great performance. Yeah.
yeah, he had that grit about him. I always ponder on what would have happened had Mike Tyson and Holyfield fought in, say, 1991 or something of that nature when they were intended to fight. At that particular time, I always ponder what would have happened. I think it would have been it would have been a better version of Mike Tyson. I think it would have been
Yeah, yeah,
probably an epic fight in some regards.
really, really epic. There are quite many fights that could have happened in the 90s, but didn't. That's the big, even though there were also many great fights that did happen in the 90s, but There
Yeah,
were a few that just got away. Yeah,
yeah,
that's definitely one of them. If that fire happened late, I mean, I believe it was supposed to happen in November '91 or something. Or
um,
yeah,
yeah. It was somewhere around that time, and then of course Mike
yeah,
had the issue with the case and everything, and
yeah.
things were
Then
derailed from there.
then Holyfield fought Bert Cooper, which
Oh yeah,
was a great letdown.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Interesting stuff.
yeah,
Now, moving ahead to 1997, of course, Mike, or the first big fight was Lennox Lewis regaining his title against Oliver McCall. This is
yeah,
probably one of the weirdest fights in the history of the sport. We did speak of the sort of issues that McCall had outside of the ring. I mean, and basically
yeah.
McCall just was crying in the ring and really wasn't throwing many shots and just getting hit and made it just an awkward situation just overall for Lennox Lewis and Mills Lane. And I saw an interview from a few years back, somewhere in this decade at least, um, where I think it had something to do with his mom. He was thinking about his mom or something of that nature, and he kind of just lost it and knew he wasn't going to be right, I guess, prior to even showing up for the fight. But yeah,
Mm.
definitely one of those interesting things. What did you think of it at that time?
Yeah, I don't think McCall should have been allowed to fight because he was a mess. He was a wreck
Yeah,
psychologically. So, but Don King, he unfortunately he was under Don King,
yeah.
who always,
Oh,
kind of,
Donnie.
yeah, thought about the money more than anything else. So,
Yeah,
yeah, I remember seeing that fight. Uh, at first, yeah, McCall did fight in the first 2 rounds. I think he even did
yeah,
did it did well, in the first 2 rounds, but then he just stopped fighting in the third, I believe, and
yeah,
just kept crying and walking away, and that was a sorry spectacle, really.
yeah.
So
It was, and yeah, the sport of boxing is very interesting, and
yeah, I
so
mean, Louis he had the luck to get the win the title twice by default. You can say first time he got it because Riddick Bowe had
oh yeah,
thrown it in the bin,
yeah,
and
yeah.
the second time he just won it in a no fight.
Yeah. It's interesting stuff for Lennox Lewis, who
Yeah,
ultimately kind of continued to get better as he got older. Now,
yeah, definitely.
March 1st of that year, '97, a guy we had already spoken about, Sugar Ray Leonard, decided to make a return to the ring against Hector Camacho Sr. Uh,
Mm.
I haven't even watched the fight. I know it happens because, of course, after 6 years being out of the ring and already being past it, I
Yeah,
mean, it was a foregone conclusion that Sugar Ray Leonard wasn't going to be able to do anything.
yeah. I mean, there are some fights that you just don't want to watch because you know what
Yeah,
happened. If a guy that you really like, just got yeah destroyed, like uh, when fighting, when he should not have fought. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, he was simply beaten down by a guy who was very very tough, very fast still. Yeah,
yeah,
so
and a very good showman. Camacho was always a
yeah,
showman for sure.
yeah,
And
that's for sure. If you remember his very colorful outfits and
oh yeah,
dancing around in the ring,
oh
I
yeah, he
think
was.
some of the crowd hated him for that, and some of them loved him for that.
Oh
So,
yes, most certainly. And speaking of that, uh, to close out that year, the big fight was Nassim Hamed, another one where some of the crowd hated him, some loved him.
yeah.
He defeated Kevin Kelly via fourth round stoppage to retain his WBO featherweight title. And for a 4 round fight, it was a very exciting fight, and I think that was primarily because
Mm,
of Ahmed's sort of carefree, lackluster, well, not lackluster, but carefree style, and him being a showman as well. And of course, his athleticism made him do things like drop back with his hands down,
yeah.
kind of play around at times. And it turned out to be a very good fight. If I'm not mistaken, I think they exchanged knockdowns in this fight.
Mm,
Uh, if I'm not
yeah.
mistaken.
Yeah, I think both guys were down 3 times or something,
Yeah,
which was pretty amazing for a 4 round fight. Yeah, Kevin Kelly was another really good fight. I mean, exciting fighter. Yeah,
yeah,
Oh, hard puncher. Yeah, or true like a warrior. Yeah, type. So yeah, but he
indeed. I,
just kind of yeah got iced by a guy
yeah,
who was just one of the biggest punchers at 126. So yeah,
no, without a doubt. And I believe is this the fight where Ahmed came out on the sort of flying carpet? I think it was this fight, right?
I'm
Or
not sure really. I don't remember.
yeah,
I've seen it a
yeah, it
long
might
time
have
ago.
been. Yeah, it's been a while since I saw it as well. But
Yeah,
Prince, yeah, definitely another one of those guys who was
very
a great showman,
flamboyant. Yeah,
very flamboyant. He had some of the funniest sort of post-fight interviews as well.
yeah, that's true. I mean, I wish he had also fought a few guys. He didn't fight Eric Morales, for instance, even
Oh
though
yeah,
he talked about wanting to fight him. So I really wonder what happened there. Why that fight didn't
yeah,
happen.
El Terrible. Yeah, that would have been a very exciting fight.
Yeah, a classic, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm,
Um, then we could jump to 1998. Of course, the first big fight was Lennox Lewis knocking out Shannon Briggs, this sort of younger Shannon Briggs at the time,
yeah.
where he was really kind of making his name. And Briggs, or I just remember Lennox Lewis at this time was starting to, in a sense, separate himself from the pack as being sort of that top guy at heavyweight. And this was a prime example of such. Lennox
Mm,
Lewis showing up and, yeah, really just bringing it to Shannon Briggs, who's the younger fighter, but definitely Lennox Lewis showed that he was a step above in a sense.
mm. Yeah, and he had to kind of overcome because the first round he was hurt. He by Briggs, and yeah, it looked like even an upset was in the making.
Mhm.
But then he, of course, bounced back uh, after the first round and kind of took over. And yeah, he just got all medieval on Shannon Briggs. That was a
Oh yeah.
really some mean punches he threw.
Hmm.
Yeah, Briggs showed a lot of heart, a lot of uh, will, but it was
Oh yeah.
not enough, of course. So he was
Yeah.
just overmatched in the end. So yeah,
Yeah. And yeah, and it just continued to, things continue to sort of excel there for Lewis. And one could argue that he was starting to reach his prime, or at least some version of such, as he continued to move forward.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, definitely. I think a major factor was again Manny Stewart, who really
yeah.
kind of I really changed him as a fighter. I believe because he kind of taught him to box more or less. I mean, he because before that Luis was more like a a puncher, more like a destroyer type fighter,
Yeah,
who was not so well coordinated. Perhaps didn't have the best defense. Was
yeah,
quite
definitely.
easy to hit.
Yeah, yeah,
So
he could get a little bit reckless on offense
yeah.
in earlier years for sure.
Another fight I would like to mention is from '96 May 10th when
Hmm.
he fought Ray Mercer, Merciless Ray Mercer.
Oh yeah, yeah,
That was
yeah. Merciless Ray.
one of the best fights in all of the '90s. Not just the heavyweight, but
Yeah, I
it
need to
was a
watch
true.
that. I haven't seen that fight with
Yeah,
him
you
and
should
Ray
really.
Mercer.
It's a true slugfest, like from the start to the beginning. It's 10 rounds, but it was one of the best 10 rounds I've seen, really.
Okay, yeah, I'm
Especially,
definitely gonna watch
yeah.
that.
So,
All
yeah,
right, yeah, I do like Ray Mercer. He was another one of those guys that didn't quite live up to sort of the potential
yeah,
that people had placed up on him. His knockout over Tommy Morrison, of course, is probably one of the most brutal that we've
yeah.
seen. And yeah, he
That
was one of
was
those guys that when he was sort of on his game, of course, he was really a very, very good fighter. But more
mm,
oftentimes than not, he wasn't truly focused in that
yeah.
manner.
The problem was I think he was not in shape too often. Yeah, what happened because yeah, he came in poor shape, simply overweight and yeah. But he really did have true talent and very very tough guy, very hard hitter, hard
Yeah,
puncher. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, definitely was tough
He
in a
also
way.
gave Holyfield a tough fight. Also,
Yeah,
yeah,
indeed. Yeah, and so yeah, then move ahead to in in '98, October 3rd, 21-year-old Floyd Mayweather Jr. won his first title, defeating veteran
oh,
Genaro Hernandez, who only two losses were to Floyd and Oscar De La Hoya
yeah,
in a fight where Floyd showed that he essentially had the makings of a special type of fighter. You know, of course, coming from
mm,
a fighting family, uh, and he was pretty much rolling on all cylinders at that particular point.
yeah. Unfortunately, I have not seen that fight yet, but I will. I do plan to. I know that Genaro Hernandez is very respected, as a champion, as a boxer.
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
Many, yeah, many. He's very respected, and he was sort of on his way out at that point.
yeah,
But definitely still a sort of a serviceable fighter
mm,
at that particular time. Um,
yeah,
we
yeah.
can
He
jump
beat some.
into.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. Go ahead.
No, he beat some good fighters. I know that he beat Azuma Nelson, for instance, and
Zuma,
yeah,
an older Zuma Nelson.
yeah, an older
Yeah,
Azuma, not the very best
yeah,
version, but
yeah.
yeah, I don't remember. He beat a few other very solid fighters, but yeah, that's
Oh yeah.
true.
All right. Yeah, I was gonna jump ahead to 1999.
Mm,
March 13th of that year, Holyfield took on Lennox Lewis,
yeah,
WBA and IBF and WBC titles on the line, of course. And that fight ended in a draw. I'm trying to think of sort of key moments from that fight. I need to go back and watch it actually, but I do know that many felt that Lennox Lewis deserved the nod in that fight, and
yeah,
ultimately it somehow ended up a draw. And Holyfield looked as though he wasn't that sort of same fighter he had come to know, that definitely from the mid portions of the '90s, early and
yeah.
mid portion. What were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that was yeah, I thought Lewis won definitely. I remember Holyfield only had a really good moment in the third round when he kind of hurt Lewis with yeah, a few punches. But Lewis really, I remember I think I scored it 117 to 113 for Lewis.
Okay.
So
Okay.
yeah, I think that Holyfield didn't win more than 3 rounds, most likely.
Yeah.
So yeah,
And I think that's one of the reasons, that it becoming a draw has been sort of like a little controversial sort of
yeah,
stain that's there on that whole fight. And of course, it wasn't as big a clash as expected, And of course, Lennox Lewis would go on to win a unanimous decision in that first fight. But at this point, as I was mentioning earlier, I think we could see clearly that Lennox Lewis was the better fighter, at least at this
yeah,
particular point in time.
yeah. He was slightly younger, and it was just his time, and Holyfield's time had passed. You might say,
Yeah,
despite him winning another world title after that, but that was against John Ruiz, so
yeah,
uh,
yeah.
not a
The
really great
silent
opponent.
man.
Yeah, one of the most boring champions of all times, I guess.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, in that multi-belt era, there's always opportunities for someone to pick up
Yeah,
another title, but that definitely wasn't an indication that Holyfield was still
yeah. I
the
mean,
same guy.
I believe Lewis he vacated a belt because he didn't want to fight Ruiz, but of course that was not because he was afraid of him, but because he knew that it would be a boring fight, a stinker,
Yeah, and it
most
wouldn't.
likely.
Yeah, and it will probably be a turnoff for fans as well, or the
Yeah.
expectations. I think, just given Reese's style,
Mm,
the expectations would have been essentially known that, it wasn't going to
yeah,
be super entertaining.
definitely.
Now, September 18th of that year, 1999, was still here. This is when Felix Tito Trinidad took on the Golden Boy Oscar De La Hoya. This was
Yeah.
a very big fight. And I'm reading here, it did 1.4 million pay-per-view buys, which is good. This was one of those sort of classic rival battles of Mexico and Puerto Rico.
Mm,
Uh, in this fight, of course, it ended in somewhat controversial fashion for many, as it turned out to be a victory for Felix Trinidad. Uh, I guess the story of the fight, it was a very tactical fight. If you're just a fan of just boxing and fighters trying to outthink each other, then this is definitely a fight for you to certainly check out. But it ended in somewhat controversial fashion with Felix Trinidad getting the decision, majority decision over Oscar De La Hoya, who had taken his foot off the gas in the latter part of the fight. What are your
mm.
thoughts on that?
Well, I definitely thought that De La Hoya deserved to win. I didn't score the fight, but I do remember that he won like at least 7 of the first 9 rounds, I think, or 8. I don't know, maybe. So he was just outboxing Trinidad for most of that time. But then, of course, yeah, after the 9th round, I believe he started to get really cautious, and the judges kind of punished him for that. So
Yeah, he and his punch output dropped, which I think kind of
yeah,
factored into that. And even though Trinidad wasn't necessarily doing anything to hurt him, he
yeah,
was continuing to press forward. He was landing some shots,
mm,
and I think De La Hoya was in sort of in a sense of playing it a bit safe. He kind of
yeah,
let Trinidad off the hook in a sense, as well. And I actually I had scored it. I was watching it a couple months back. I had it a draw in scoring it. Now
yeah. Well,
that being said, some of the
good.
rounds were very close. Some of the rounds were very,
Oh
very
yeah,
close.
yeah. I
So I
guess
could
so.
see it. I could see it
Yeah,
going in De La Hoya's favor.
yeah.
Um,
He was fighting a very technical fight. That's true. Yeah. But I think also that fight showed the difference between those two because
mhm.
Tito Trinidad was always more a puncher. You know, he was such a great puncher, offensive fighter, and but he was never a true boxer. You know, a technical guy. While De La Hoya could do both, so that was the big difference, I guess.
Yeah,
So yeah,
yeah, definitely. Then another fight noted here is Fernando de Vargas. He defeated Winky Wright in this year.
oh
That's a fight I
yeah,
still need to watch. I've seen highlights of it, and I know that there are those that think that Winky Wright deserved the nod in that fight.
yeah. I don't know really. It was a very close fight. I think definitely. Yeah, I believe Vargas was better in the first half, and then Wright was better in the second half. So
Yeah,
it might have been a draw for I think maybe I'm not sure. I haven't scored it, and I have seen it once, like 7, 8 years ago, something.
yeah, yeah,
So
like that
yeah,
sometimes.
mm,
Yeah, I think that yeah, that kind of the story of Vargas's career, uh, looking good early and kind of fading out a bit in the latter part of the fight,
yeah, definitely, yeah,
at least at that top level, because he was certainly an elite level talent. But
yeah.
yeah,
He was. It's just that he had to compete against some of the very best, of that time. So yeah,
yeah,
against of course Trinidad, he did pretty well, but in the end he just got uh, out punched and yeah, taken out in the end. But of
yeah.
course, Trinidad, I think, also threw quite many low blows in that fight, so that was a little bit
Oh yeah,
unfair. Yeah,
yeah, Trinidad. Yeah, yeah. And watching that fight, that was another a good fight. I say Vargas was also he was definitely in a bunch of exciting fight. But yeah, Trinidad used some very veteran tactics there in that
mm,
fight, and it was a younger Vargas, and
yeah,
Trinidad took advantage of sort of that fact.
yeah. Vargas was like 23, I believe, and Trinidad was 27, or, yeah, 28
Yeah.
almost. So yeah, great
So
fight.
yeah, yeah, indeed, another one of those sort of Mexican Puerto Rican rivalries.
Mm,
Now, that was all that was from that list that we initially sent out. But I was just thinking when we think 90s, of course, there was some other stuff out there. I was going to look it up. I think it was in 90 something. Ika Biabuchi against
mhm.
David Tua in an exciting
Yeah,
fight where they were slugging it out. I'm going to look that up, see what that was.
yeah, it was. Yeah, just a classic fight. I scored it a draw actually, um, because I believe Tua he won a lot of rounds in the middle rounds. Uh,
Yeah.
Ikabuchi was better in the first three. Yeah, something like
Yeah.
that.
So
Then
yeah,
he
this took
came.
place. Yeah, it took place on the 7th of June in 1997.
Yeah, that's right. So it was also very close fight, a classic like
Yeah, yeah,
between between two beasts, true beasts. Like,
yeah, yeah,
what really amazed me was at the end, after all those punches they had taken, they just looked like nothing had happened. Like both
yeah, yeah.
guys.
It was tough, and I know at that particular time, up until at least last year or the year before or whatever, they had the record for the most punches thrown in a heavyweight fight,
Yeah.
and that was surpassed by Chris Arreola versus Adam Konoski.
Oh,
I think that
really?
happened like last year or the year before or something. I hadn't watched that fight.
Hmm.
Kanowski won a unanimous decision, I believe. But
All
I
right.
didn't watch the fight. I don't really care to watch it.
Yeah,
But
but that fight was certainly not as watchable as this one.
yeah, yes, this was a very watchable fight, and you had two like guys with legitimate power that were sort of battling out in there. It showed that they had chins as well.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
now,
Amazing.
now Tua, he's one of those guys. I just find him to be sort of interesting. He's one of those guys that if you do mythical matchups, everyone always picks him to win whatever mythical matchup that people list out
Yeah,
there. I think he was very good in all of that stuff, but he did lose at that sort of top level, when
yeah,
he went to get some of those elite guys. So he can, in some senses,
yeah.
in my eyes, be overrated at times, but he was very good, very tough, strong fighter.
Mm. Freakishly strong and tough. Yeah, I think he sometimes had those nights when he didn't do that much. He was doing a lot of plodding, and then sometimes he could just explode in the end and score a knockout. But against Lennox Lewis and Chris Bird, I think he didn't do enough. But he was, of course, against Lennox Lewis, he was too short, simply too much to overcome.
Yeah,
So
yeah, and Lynx was on his game. Yeah, he
yeah,
lost to Chris Bird. Chris Bird wasn't a big heavyweight, but technically speaking, he was very good. Did like
yeah,
Chris
great
Bird.
defense and all that. Yeah.
Yeah, and speaking of Chris Bird, I had saw something recently, as early as a couple of weeks ago, where I don't know if he's being serious or not. He was talking of coming back and challenging for the middleweight title,
Wow.
which would be pretty crazy. He looks to be in excellent shape. He has this gray beard now.
Oh
But that is
yeah.
something I saw being floated around out there. Of course, you can't just come out and jump to the front of the line. But at this point,
Yeah.
yeah, that would be pretty interesting, I would say. He's 50 at this point.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty amazing. I know when he went down to light heavyweight, he didn't do so well. He got knocked out by Sean George, this guy called Sean George.
Oh yeah, I'm seeing
He,
that there.
yeah, so this guy wasn't really a top contender, this guy George, but it
And he
was
only
just too much for him.
and he only fought once after that, a win against a fighter in Germany, and retired from there.
Yeah,
Um, Interesting. But thinking back on the sort of 90s in general, some fighters we kind of glanced over just that weren't on that listing per se. You did mention Tommy Morrison. I thought Tommy Morrison was he was a good fighter, a good heavyweight,
mm,
and he had a lot of backing doing. And Oklahoma was behind him. I followed
yeah,
some of his stuff for his career. Now, and ESPN had did a 30 for 30 documentary on him as well. And he's one of those fighters. I think he sort of overachieved in some senses. And he became one of the top guys at heavyweight in a legitimate fashion because his left hook was certainly one of the better that we've seen.
yeah. Wow, it was. Yeah, I think he was pretty good, definitely. I mean, against Mercer, he was. He in the first 3 rounds, I think he was really doing well and hurting Mercer with some punches, left hooks and right hooks and all that. But he had a pretty
Yeah,
weak chin, I guess. That was always one of his uh, weaknesses, and yeah, I
yeah,
guess sometimes he could be a little bit erratic. So yeah, but all in all, he was a top contender definitely, and yeah,
yeah, without a doubt. And I know he has a son, Trey
yeah,
Lippy Morrison, who I know is fighting. I haven't really checked him out in a while, but I
Yeah,
know
he's
he started to make some
undefeated.
good.
Yeah,
uh,
he's got like maybe 16 or something, 18 or I don't know.
Okay.
He
Yeah,
scored a
yeah,
lot of knockouts. Yeah,
yeah. So we'll see what transpires as far as
yeah,
his career. Um,
yeah.
another, yeah, thinking about the '90s. Some other fighters that are out there. If we think of, let me see, heavyweights. Trying to think, who else is worth mentioning? So we got Morrison. You had some other guys pop up. Barrett, Monty. I think he was '90s. Monty Barrett.
Well, you had
Mhm.
yeah, you had Michael Moore, for instance. You already
Yeah, Michael
mentioned.
Moore. Yeah, yeah. Truly, yeah, him coming from light heavyweight. Those are the good feat as far as picking up the titles at that age,
Yeah,
or at heavyweight coming from that weight.
yeah, he was quite yeah, accomplished, I guess, fighter. Had a lot
Certainly.
of power and yeah, good, some good boxing skills. He was
Yeah,
trained by Stewart as well at first. Yeah,
yeah. A Kronk gym fighter.
yeah,
Yeah,
Kron Jun.
Kronk. So yeah, Kronk. Yeah, put out a lot of good guys over here. So
Yeah,
yeah, it's amazing thinking about it now. But let me see the exact dates. So 1 second. Manny Pacquiao, who made his debut. Let me see. I think it's '95 time frame. And it's pretty crazy thinking about it. That he's the fact that he's still fighting. So yes, January 22nd, 1995, Manny Pacquiao made his debut in the Philippines.
oh wow, yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it
He's
is. He's still fighting. That's
still fighting to this day, and I know you've probably seen the news that Pacquiao is intending to challenge Conor McGregor in a
yeah,
boxing match.
yeah. I've seen it. Yeah. I don't. I think that sounds quite bizarre. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I think
I,
it's one of those money generating things for both of them.
yeah,
Pacquiao released a statement saying that he's gonna give a large portion of whatever proceeds to charity or donate them to use for his country, which he has in the past shown that he has been very philanthropic.
yeah,
And I think about it, and it's really a spectacle. That's what this fight would be. So I take it for what it is, and my expectations would be set at sort of that spectacle level. I don't take it as like a seriously competitive sort of boxing match, but I'm sure it's going to generate a lot of buzz and a lot of that Conor McGregor being a top
yeah,
level boxer type of chatter that it got last time around when he faced
yeah.
Floyd.
Definitely. Yeah. I don't know what else to say. He's not a boxer, but I guess he has learned some tricks, maybe some boxing tricks. He fought Mayweather, of course, but that was a complete different scenario, I guess.
Yeah.
A guy
Um,
more his own size, and all that. Yeah.
oh yeah. Uh, yeah. Um,
Mm.
what else? '90s. '90s. What else? Anything else you want to discuss from the '90s?
Yeah, I'm not sure really. We already talked about that De La Hoya Quartet fight Quartet.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. That was yeah. We did mention that in another one.
Yeah,
That was an excellent fight. So I
yeah,
just looked up a interesting thing. So leading into Ring Magazine's pound for pound ratings for that decade. In 1990, the number one pound for pound fighter was Julio Cesar Chavez.
oh,
Now, when we finished in 1999, take a wild guess. Who do you think was the number one fighter at that particular time?
De La Hoya.
Actually, it was Roy Jones
Oh
Jr.
yeah,
Because
Roy
Roy
Jones.
was on top of his game. So they had, yeah, it's pretty crazy looking at it. Roy was number one in '99. Then you had Floyd Mayweather, Felix Trinidad, Oscar De La Hoya, Shane Mosley, Mark Too Sharp Johnson,
Oh
Ricardo
yeah.
Lopez, Eric Morales, Bernard Hopkins, and Stevie Johnson. Crazy.
Mm, pretty interesting. Yeah,
Yeah,
Stevie Johnston. I haven't seen that much of his fights, but he was
me
a
either.
very skilled fighter. I've read about that, and yeah, I've seen a couple of his fights. I think he was in talks to fight Mosley or Mayweather. I'm not sure, but
Mm.
they didn't want to fight. I mean, that was the story that they were not so keen. One of them was not so keen on fighting because he was so clever.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know a ton about him. I've seen his name before. Can't remember exactly what his biggest sort of matchups were, but yeah, I definitely have seen his name thrown out there.
Mm,
Uh, but yeah, not surprising. Hey, sometimes you have those, and we're going through it now where it's fights that would be so great and you want them to materialize and just seem to not
yeah,
happen. Want to see Spence versus Crawford? That would be a huge one. But
yeah,
at this point, who knows?
yeah. That's true.
And Crawford, he's going to be fighting Kell Brook at
Oh,
147.
really? Hmm.
Yeah, apparently this right here is a done deal. And
I
it's not,
thought
of course.
Brooke was not returning to 147.
Well, he's able to get another payday. I think that what I saw, Brook is going to get 2 million for the
Yeah.
fight,
Wow.
so he's going to make his way back down there.
Who would
Um,
say no to that?
yeah, why not? Yeah, of course, this is not going to have that type of sort of expectation behind, or it's not going to be the same as it would have been a couple of years back. I'm hoping it's not pay-per-view because that would be
Yeah.
a shame unless they had some overly stacked card to follow it up. But
Mm.
it's kind of the story of boxing. We got a guy, arguably the number one pound for pound guy, taking on one who hasn't been at his best,
Yeah.
especially whose time at that weight is pretty much past, and
Yeah.
we're left with that.
Yeah, I think, well, Kell Brook, he does have something left still in him, but
Yeah,
not enough, I guess, to beat Terence Crawford.
yeah,
Yeah, he does have, he seems to have discovered his power or rediscovered it at 154. So maybe he might have some sort of a puncher's chance. I don't know.
we'll
Yeah,
certainly see, and it'll be interesting to see if whether or not he's affected by the drop to 147. Um,
yeah,
but yeah,
that's true.
that aside, of course, yeah, we'll have to most certainly get together for another one of these conversations. We'll have to pick out another era here this next time
Yeah,
around.
I guess the next one is the 2000, the first decade.
All
That
right, we can
one,
certainly do that. We can certainly do that.
yeah,
2000s, a lot of good stuff to talk about there.
yeah, a lot of stuff. Really, some really great fights happened then.
Yeah.
Hmm,
All
yeah,
right, sounds good then. Well, we've been going at it for a good bit of time here. I don't even see the time track, but I know it's probably well over an hour.
yeah, I think like 1 hour 45 or something. I don't
Oh wow, yeah,
a
hey, it's
whole
crazy.
movie, a whole movie.
Well, for you boxing fans, hey, join in on the discussion. It's gonna be a long one for you. Cool then. Well, all right. So until next time, I guess I'll be checking you out.
Yeah,
We'll be in contact for sure.
yeah, definitely.
All right. You have a good one.
Yeah, you too. Yeah, bye bye.